tarot and astrology are probably the best ways to get some type of answer that'll make sense to you. Hi, my name is Strachen. I've started tarot in '96. And I remember because it was the weekend that I was going away for a 5-month trip. And it was also the weekend that Tupac got shot. That's how I always remember when I started. It was 1996. And then 2 years later, I started studying astrology. I was looking for a teacher and I found a teacher that was looking for a student. So that old adage of when the student's ready, the teacher will show up, that actually happened to me. So my focus is prediction of specific events with a 1-week time frame on either side of the day. My particular approach is I don't just look at the sun sign. So I'm looking at your entire natal chart. And what's good about that is, and I do that right in the beginning, is it'll show me kind of, what's the word? Kind of your core expression or the thing that's most important to you, your values, how you think, and how your energy works. So like, for instance, with some people, I look at their chart and I say, oh, look, you can only do something if you feel emotionally connected to it. And they go, yes. And what's interesting is when you're reading someone's chart, is that there's all these different elements of who they are, but they don't normally think about it as one continuous story. So that's also interesting from the querent side of it. Nobody does what I do. Nobody, I haven't ran across anybody where you sit down with them and you give them a word or 3 numbers and they'll tell you what's going on in your life and then create a chart from those words or numbers. And that's kind of something that popped into my head, and I tested it over the last, 2008 till now, last 15 years. Because I've actually developed a system where I can read words and numbers, and it's something that I worked on in 2006. And the first one, I had a correspondence for every number between 1 and 930. And then the second one, I have a correspondence for every number between 1 and basically 2100. Now, the third system is kind of like that, but what I've done is I've created this symbol set. I call them time markers, and they're ways of classifying moments of time. So it could either be clock time, person's transit, planetary position, because that's also really time, although people don't generally look at it that way. And I read that. I think it was 2001. And I was out of work, and I says, where should I look for work? And the card said, stay home. The next day was September 11th. Yeah, and I had actually worked in the World Trade Center, actually in the World Financial Center, when they had the first bombing. I was literally across the street when they actually had the first bombing that didn't bring the towers down. And then that time it said, stay home, which was ironic because a lot of work that I was doing was in financial services at the time. I love first time readings. I think I'm more excited than the person getting the reading, because if it's a first time reading, is their world gets expanded. So, and I've had people that had astrology readings before, and they'll say to me, well, I didn't know astrology was like that. Because part of what I do is I'll read a chart, or I'll create a chart from the person's unconscious mind, and I'll read that chart like most people read tarot cards. So you can get very specific things. Like one client, I said to her, she gave me a photograph and it had a timestamp. So I either read a word or 3 numbers. And from the timestamp, I was able to tell her what she had for lunch. And the ironic thing was and she said, that's right. The ironic thing was she only has lunch, that particular lunch, in the place that she took the photo in. Mostly it'll be work, family, relationships. Every so often I'll have somebody that wants to know if they're on their path. Usually they are, but sometimes there's a bit of fine tuning. If you're writing it down, you're actually not listening and you'll miss stuff. And one client said to me that they went back and listened to the recording and they heard stuff that they hadn't heard even though they were in the meeting. So I think that does happen. And the other thing is I mentioned specific dates of when things are happening. So it's better to have it totally documented. And even people say, oh, I like to take notes. I still, it's a better idea to record it because you can be present and you can ask better questions. I used to do this thing with my son when we'd catch the bus, and I'd say, what time is the bus coming? And he'd tell me. I said, what time do you think it's going to come? And he'd tell me. And then I'd get out a chart and I'd tell him what time I thought the bus was coming, right? And I've done this about 4 times. And the time the bus came was always close to the time that I'd say, right? And then one time we did it, and I thought this isn't going to work because it was a very busy bus stop where 4 buses stopped, but it still worked. But the one that blew my mind was I was taking him back home to his mother's place, and I told him which bus we were going to catch, the number, so he'd know which bus we were catching. And I says, look, we're going to catch the ghost bus. And I had no idea what that meant, but that's what it said in the chart. We're going to catch this ghost bus. So this is some unscheduled bus. I said, okay. So we get out of Central Station. We're crossing the street. I'm like, we've just missed our bus. That's the bus we need to take, the 390. It was the 395. So we caught this other bus, but it wasn't scheduled. I was like, oh, we can catch this and we can connect back to where we need to go because it doesn't go exactly where we need to go, but we can make a connection. So we're waiting at the bus stop, and there's a woman there, and I says, you see that bus over there? That's the bus we need to catch. That's our connection. That's the bus that we missed. So we caught a bus after the bus that we've missed and got to the stop before the bus we were supposed to catch, and we got on the bus that we missed. And I thought that was pretty cool. Actually, what's always interesting to me is when people show up that actually don't believe it or have never had a reading before. And I remember one client, one querent rather, in particular, she was like, I was telling her all this stuff and she wrote it down. And then she contacted me, and it was an email reading, so I'd never met her. And then she contacted me about a month or 2 later and said, well, like everything you said is actually happening. So that was pretty cool.